In. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome, Anurag. Welcome. Welcome, Amrita. Hi, Abha. Welcome. Akshara. Welcome. Hi, Dolly. Hi, Dhruv. Hi, David. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Hi, Hemant. Nitin Vedya. Thank you for joining. Welcome. Thank you all for joining in. We would sincerely like to thank our knowledge partner IALD India for putting together such a stellar lineup of knowledgeable webinars for the industry. And a very special thanks to our event partners, K-Lite and LTech, for supporting us throughout the series. Here is a short clip about K-Lite and LTech. Thank you all for your attention. With this, I would like to introduce you to Mr. Linus Lopez, our moderator for today's session. He is a partner in the firm Liliro Lopez Lighting Design Consultants in New Delhi, India, and over the last 21 years has worked on the lighting solutions for the variety of projects from heritage and hospitality to offices, entertainment, residential and commercial, along with museums, art galleries, and exhibitions that carry a signature brand of lighting design. You can find about him, uh, more about him on the chat box. Over to you, Linus.
Thank you, Deepika, and thank you, Ms. Frankfurt, for helping make these discussions about light and lighting design a reality. And on behalf of IALD India, a very warm welcome to all our attendees for what promises to be a very interesting panel discussion on a very important topic, something that affects us all, because our tangible heritage plays a significant role in helping us to understand our own history and culture. And we have technology today that provides a variety of choices for us as designers. How do you light heritage? How do you express this cultural, historical, and visual importance, right? So these are things that we are going to discuss today, the right application of this technology, keeping in mind the significance and the context which we have to navigate, especially with respect to dynamic and colored lighting. But lighting heritage has a number of other challenges as well. So to discuss how to strike the right balance between the aesthetics of design and the ethics of heritage conservation, while also upholding the responsibilities, the very significant responsibilities entrusted to us. And when working with multiple agencies, each with a different, sometimes contradictory agenda, we have today with us a very experienced, very talented set of experts. And I would like to start introducing them to you and letting you know that the detailed introduction and their social media handles are in the chat box. To start with, I would like to introduce a multi-award winning conservation architect, Abha Narain Lamba. Abha's architectural practice focuses on conservation projects across the country. She's a consultant to ICROM, to the Global Heritage Fund and the World's Monument Fund. And she has served on a variety of heritage committees, especially for Delhi and Mumbai, and is a staunch advocate for Mumbai's heritage. She has worked on urban guidelines for heritage precincts, including some seminal work to successfully nominate Mumbai's Art Deco and Victorian ensemble as the UNESCO World Heritage Site. Thank you very much, Abha, for making it convenient to join today.
Thank you.
Representing LIRC today, we have architect and technical marketing expert, Ashish Bahal. Ashish works for Signify as a lead architect, but also as head of specification sales. But more importantly, he brings to the table green design and an aesthetic approach into his work. He has worked in many high-profile lighting projects with Signify and Philips, and is a permanent faculty at the Signify Lighting Academy. He has been a contributor and part of various committees like the IGBC, the GRIHA, GBCI, and BIS. Welcome, Ashish. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Our third panelist, Manav Bhargava, is a practicing architect, lighting designer, and an educator. But particularly relevant to today's discussions, he is also a history buff, with interests extending into politics, food, and languages. In 2006, he established Mandala, an award-winning design studio based out of New Delhi. And they engage in a diverse genre of work, from architectural lighting, both in the permanent as well as in the temporary formats, where he directs sound and light shows. And as an educator, he teaches at various design and architectural institutes. Welcome, Manav. Thank you for joining us. Next, Sarvdeep, who needs very little introduction, principal of Lucent Worldwide, one of the leading lighting design practices in Asia with offices in India, China, Qatar, and in Germany. Sarvdeep has over 3 decades of lighting design experience and has completed over 5,000 large and small projects in various corners of the globe. But he has a soft corner for heritage projects and has done some outstanding work, including some work at the Golden Temple in Amritsar, the Brihadeshwara Temple, and the Pink City Illumination in Jaipur. His work in the Shenzhen city was awarded by the European Parliament, where he was invited to speak on the beautification of cities and conservation of the environment. Great having you on board today, Sarvdeep. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, Linus.
And joining us all the way from Italy, we have another award-winning lighting designer, Susanna Antico, founder and principal of the consulting firm Studio Susanna Antico Lighting Design, based in Milan. With a degree in architecture, but interests in urban planning and sociology, Susanna brings a multidisciplinary approach to architectural lighting design. She has specialized in this brand of artistic architectural responses and environmentally friendly urban lighting projects. She strongly advocates the idea of investigating the human scale in urban scapes and believes that lighting should go beyond just luminance values. She's also a professional member of the IALD and is on the board of directors. Welcome, Susanna. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here.
So, before we start today, when we're going to critically address all these issues of what a good designer brings to the concept of lighting heritage, I'd like to get a poll in just to kick things off to help our panelists to understand who are we addressing as attendees. So if Messe Frankfurt team could please share the first poll question. Do let us know what is your profession, all those who are attending today. Because basically we're going to have responses on 3 rounds discussing the past, present, and the future. So we'd like you to tell us who you are and what you do, and that would give us an idea on how to direct the responses to the benefit of all. So predominantly lighting designers and people from the lighting industry, but we also have a few people from the architectural background, as well as those who are students and educators. Welcome, everybody. Abha, I would like you to set the ball rolling. Firstly, by describing, the importance of heritage to you and to the community, and what is our role in maintaining it and sort of integrating it into the community, which is, one of the most important things that we're looking at. Abha, you're on mute. You have to just unmute yourself.
Okay. As an architect and one who's worked in the field of architectural conservation, I feel lighting is something that it helps. It's fundamental to one of our 5 senses of sight. And the way you perceive a building, an environment, a mood is very, very largely dependent on how it's lit. You could have this, if I were to take an example outside our field, outside architecture, and I said that let's look at film as a medium. And you might have the heroine or the hero, and you can do as much makeup, you can do whatever. But just a shift in the light, the quality of the light can change the whole mood of a movie, from light and joyous or a rom-com to something more somber or even sinister or dark. And in a way, especially in the field of urbanism and architecture, urban conservation, light plays the same role, because when we perceive a historic monument or a historic site, what we see as visitors to the site, whether it's facade illumination or interior illumination, our experience of a site is greatly, greatly defined by the quality of light, by how that particular hero, which is the monument or the building that one is seeing, is really translated for a visitor. And that's where, as you know, as a conservation architect, I've always felt that as an architect, you might have an ego and you might want to build your own and create your own identity. But when you are working on conservation, you've got to let your ego step back. You have to put the building and the original intent of the architect who built that structure or who designed the interiors before your own. And the same applies to lighting, because very often you go to a historic monument and you see that the lighting might have taken over and become the hero of the element rather than the monument itself. So a lighting designer needs to be extremely particular that at every point of the design, they ask themselves the question, am I heroing the building I'm designing or the space that I'm designing, or am I heroing the light? And that, if that is done, then you can decide, then what mood or how you want to portray or how you want to hero that building, or in a museum, the object, or in a urban conservation issue, an entire streetscape really is something that's critical. And a good project is where people are able to really engage with the building and understand the mood, or the kind of message it's putting across.
Wonderfully
And
put.
I think all of you, I must comment all of you lighting designers, Sarvdeep, Linus, even the ones I haven't known personally. I think you're doing a tremendous job at heroing our monuments and architectural heritage.
Thank you. So taking up a couple of points that Abha has brought in. One is the question of ego and sort of letting the building speak for itself because of space in the community, and the importance of sort of understanding the background of that space. Manav, I'd like you to take that dialogue further in describing your process, how you bring that building into the narrative of lighting design.
Right. No, I completely agree with Abha, where the hero has to be the building. But when you're talking about the narrative, as a lighting designer, what I like to do is when I'm working with light with a building, I like to explore the narrative. The narrative could be anything, but there is no predetermined process for me to follow. But there are so many layers, the stories, elements that come together to form the narrative, and the narrative kind of evolves. So coming back to, I agree with what Abha is saying. In fact, the foremost and the most obvious element is the architecture itself, the architectural elements, the details, the expression, the form. That is what is the foremost constituent of a narrative for me. But what I also like to do is interpret and also express this architectural form through the prism of the aspirations, the values, the cultural, social, political background behind the building, because the architecture itself is a manifestation of that, even the heritage that we're talking about. So for me, it's also, for me, as when I start interpreting the architecture through this prism, I feel it adds a little more value and relevance to the lighting, the story that I'm trying to express, and the structure. But besides that, I also feel these structures also have a lot of stories to tell. The stories of how these spaces were used, how the people lived there. And these are stories which visitors are generally very interested in. And for that, I think there is a lot of research that sometimes we need to get into, like how these spaces were lit at night, how the architecture responded to the night time. Of course, we know, it's very, we know how the Indian, I'm talking about in the Indian context, how the Indian heritage really used to respond to the daytime and sunlight. But there are certain specific examples where we know where the architecture was determined by the moonlight. So those are certain elements which I like to also bring into my narrative and try and recreate. One is expressing the structure, but the other is recreating the atmosphere, and try and create an atmosphere and the experience and the mood of the place which people could probably imagine, it's all in one way, it could be recreating the atmosphere. The other, in another way, one could just be interpreting it. And it may be a little abstract and little not so obvious, but it's still about capturing the essence and the spirit of the place. And,
Right.
and
Yeah. Go on.
sometimes, just this little bit of extra research into the background of the monument gives you so many clues of how to go about the lighting for that place. And so I think that's how I would like, generally, I would approach the narrative, the building of the narrative for my heritage projects.
Nicely captured. In essence, understanding, the locus genus, the genus loci of the place itself, understanding what it meant to people and how they view it, that's very important in defining the narrative. Right? Susanna, how would this change? Do you think there are any real differences in this approach between, let's say, we are viewing it here in India and the way you view it in Europe? And could you also just lead us through, the various typologies that you are dealing with in terms of heritage?
Yes. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Thanks again for inviting me here. The approaches, I think, are quite similar because we have the luck as a lighting designer professionals to be a new profession. So we had a lot of exchanges. We really used technology in a similar way, and we had a lot of exchange. Of course, our cultures are very different. So our expressions as a result of that are quite different. In Europe, we have architectural lighting and monumental and heritage lighting. We had it for the last 40 years, I would say. And initially, it was very spectacular. It was like, we can't stand that buildings and monuments become dark. We can't see them anymore, or we see them distorted by casual reflections of street lighting. So there was like some kind of revolution, and this brought to some spectacular and extreme cases, because without a master plan, without coordination and coherence, it was sometimes almost scary. So what is that? There is a building floating up there. Then it became more humble, more refined. And of course, you tell me which typologies. Every city calls us for the jewels. They trust us the jewels. So there is a lot of work going on in downtown areas and where buildings are representatives. Sometimes are these religious buildings or administrative offices, but this belongs to the private areas. Then you have also, public administration and public money. And then you also have private people that say, hey, I also want my building to be seen at night. So you have these two forces that without a coordination do create some confusion in the city. Unfortunately, not every city also has a master plan, and a master plan that helps you with this coherence. And on top of that, there is too much concentration of lighting interventions in downtown areas. Lighting brings identity. Can you imagine you go to Paris and that night, the Eiffel Tower is not lit? You're going to be furious. You were not in Paris. You bought a room with a view on the tower. It's not lit. You were not in Paris. You can send all the pictures you want. And this is one story, but this creates also some tension sometimes with the population, because you want to come home and be happy and you feel you belong. You want to feel this identity of belonging to a space. And unfortunately, we do not give the same care. And not only in Europe, I mean, I think a bit everywhere, on finding what is the representation of a certain area, what is the beauty that can be enhanced and that you can be proud of. Yeah. So this is something that is that still needs to happen. We don't invest in the outskirts enough. We redo the same buildings over and over. And that's a bit of a pity.
Yeah, that's true. There are lots of challenges, not the least of them being, the ownership of the property. But, the overriding thing is that heritage typically belongs to everybody, right? And that's why it is, so important how we deal with it. But very interesting, this take on culture and its role in heritage. And Sarvdeep, I'd like you to take up this question here, because you worked in so many different countries across the world. Have you seen this response? Is it important for us as designers to look at the cultural impact of what we do?
Linus, absolutely. And basically, the culture is already embedded in the building. The hero has the culture and the character already there. And the emotions change. Now, these buildings, which we normally do and we call heritage buildings, they are a couple of centuries old. And what we are going to do to them is going to last probably a decade, and which is going to be a very small part of the total life of the building. So what we are dealing with is a small emotion in the main character. And these emotions are definitely different in the countries, and they're very dynamic. They're changing all the time. Like Susanna said earlier, when we started lighting the buildings, we were more intricate, we were making them brighter, and we were losing a lot of character of the building itself and trying to make it spectacular rather than enhancing the architecture. I think now all of us are more sensitive to the architecture. We are enhancing the architecture. We're not compromising on the character. And that's across the board. That's how things are all over the world. But one thing is certain, that the building was built for the day, actually, not for the night. Night is incidental. And the building, a lot of heritage buildings have changed their emotion. That means they were made for a particular function, like a palace is now being converted into a hotel. So the emotion has changed, or to a museum. There are a lot of even religious buildings which have, which are not being used for the purpose they were built for. So there is a change in emotion. I personally would enhance the architecture sensitively and bring out that try to bring out the emotion which the building presently is for. So respecting the architecture, respecting the hero,
Yeah.
but also with light trying to bring out the mood of the hero.
Yeah, very well put.
Well, if I may pipe in, Sarvdeep and I worked together on the Jaipur illumination project. And you mentioned that, heritage belongs to everybody, but there were more than 350 different shopkeepers and businesses and houses in all those streets we did. So a lot of that was also, being able to convince the locals that this was that there needed to be a consistency. Like Susanna said, you can't have warm light in one and cold light in the other and create this, really schizophrenic urban scape. So that is so important.
Yeah. And I think taking from, this important word that Sarvdeep was stressing on, when you bring emotion into that response, very obviously it has a cultural impact. It has involvement of a community, because it's no longer just a single person's emotion. You're talking about a community at large, right? So really nicely expressed there, Sarvdeep. Ashish, from a manufacturer's point of view, but a sensitive manufacturer, being an architect and in this role, very often you have also seen this both from a design standpoint. How important is it? Where do you take this historical significance into it when you're briefing your designers about design for heritage?
Well, you see, end of the day, the first thing that we definitely look at, and I mean, of course, I I'm part of a very elite community today, so I'm sure we are all masters. I'm just a small child around, but still, I think whatever understanding, like Manav talked about, researching about the history, looking at some clues which we can definitely pick and enhance for that matter, and definitely the architectural elements. You see, that's generally the approach. But then I think most important is the context and the how the premise, for example, is plus, because coming from a manufacturer's perspective, we also see the issue of vandalism, for example, how accessible whatever we install is to people, because it's something we cannot control often. It's not also about the day one of when you click the first picture, but also the longevity of how will it sustain the 10 years that Basur was talking about, for that matter. I think it's all a very important aspect. I mean, at times we've had these great instances of monkeys taking over the complex and just killing any design intent that we ever had. So so we did the Rashtrapati Bhavan, where actually we almost get complaints on a daily basis where monkeys come and just take off the cables, for example. So it's quite so one, yes, I think from a design perspective, from a sensitive contextual response perspective, I think that's of course the starting process. But end of the day, we also have to safeguard our installation and make sure it is functioning as desired till the end of life, for example. So I think all of these are equal importance to us when it comes to approaching any design project, for that matter. And plus, of course, how we monitor the health of such installations, which is now because of, let's say, technology, possible to do it even remotely. So you can actually put these installations on the web or on a cloud or all that geeky stuff, and you have an app to talk to it, for example, and get reports and stuff like that. So I think while it's great to of course start from the the scratch and look at the historical context. Of course, you've heard I don't have anything to add to what already our panelists have spoken about, but I think the longevity is equally important, and making sure that functions as desired for a long time. Yeah.
No, that's in fact very significant, because it's the best design gets compromised when the actual light fixture faces a problem, either because of weather or because of, let's say, animals, insects. So it is a significant impact on what kind of manufacturing approach is there to help us solve these problems at site. So thanks a lot. Before we go into round two, where we discuss some of the current challenges that we are facing, I'd just like to break into another poll question to get a little bit more feedback from our attendees on the question of whether lighting heritage improves the image of a place, a city, or a country. Do you think that lighting contributes in a very positive way to taking that place up in a list of places that you must visit because of what it looks like, how the heritage has been treated? Is there something that light does to improve this understanding and this appreciation? Right. So there you are. For everybody, it is very important that lighting plays a very, very significant role in this, right? And it's that understanding that we need to carry back into our design. And so, for example, Susanna, in your award-winning work for the Antwerp Cathedral, this process of design, could you sort of describe, starting from that first client brief, your response to that brief? What is it like to get approvals from agencies? Can you sort of take us through what you went through for a typical design project?
Yes, I'm not on mute. Well, it's interesting because the client doesn't always know what they want. They have a desire, they have seen something, and they would like to bring that atmosphere, that success, that beauty in their city. So this is a really nice exchange, at least in the beginning. But mainly, what is very important is that they look for you, that you don't have to say, please let me do that, because then they will listen to you, and that they trust you. Architectural lighting, heritage lighting is so expensive. They cannot risk to have a big flop. If you want the installation to last, the project to be successful for some more time than just the inauguration, the luminaires are expensive. So certain cities, it's quite interesting, they don't have specific regulations, so they don't have to do certain lighting design works, but they just do it out of interest. And you have two poles. You have those that do it because there are elections, and in a hurry, you know, they have seen that someone else was successful, so they throw some some projectors here and there, and others that want to give to the city a better way of life. And this is happening with the city of Antwerp. We have been working for them for 12 years, and they tell us, we don't want you anymore. You always win everything. I said, but it works out between us. I mean, there are also other designers that work with us, I mean, for the city of Antwerp. But it's true that for the cathedral, we were very happy because we had done other quite important projects, and we did also the master plan. So we know that if a colleague would have done the work, they would have done a good job. But we were so happy we did it. And it's true that there is the necessity of finding a common language. One of Abha was saying before, there are so many people involved, and everyone has to understand and to support the project and to be able to follow. And definitely, if it works well, you should, yeah, it's really nice to work for a certain city. The city of Antwerp likes our approach because we work for the citizens. We don't really work for the tourists. The tourists arrive, we're really happy they're there, but we put ourselves in the shoes of the citizens. It's like we are from Antwerp, because we start studying the history and we wonder, why was the detail done so, and what are they proud of, and what can I discover at night that I can't see at daytime, because we're like magicians. If we get to that coherence, we are able to show things in a way that they get a stronger accent. You can hide a bit of noise. So we really have a big power. But of course, as you asked, what about the Monument Commission and, what's their role? Again, in the cathedral, it was, I did there a lot because it's a very tall building. And with the fact that I managed to convince the Monument Commission to let me put luminaires on the balconies, I was able to avoid a lot of projectors from outside and throwing a lot of light up to the sky. Because when you are asymmetrical, you're at 60, 70 meters, how narrow can the beam be? No way. So we did a lot of tests at daytime in order for them to evaluate the impact. They were satisfied. And I'm really proud to say that all the luminaires we installed, if you take them away, all what you have to do is to block a lot of holes in the joints, but only there. We didn't make one hole in the stones. We had all sorts of accessories that allowed us to go and clamp on the stones without ruining everything. We had the chance that in the specific cases, the Monument Commission didn't want to discuss with us the kind of lighting, because this happens in some countries. Italy is one of them. The Monument Commission says, I want the lighting like in daytime. So sometimes they say, what time do you want it? You want early morning? You want afternoon? What do you want? I totally agree that these buildings were built to be seen at daytime. But unfortunately, man has decided to live also at night and to have a night city. Yeah. And a night city, it's a different one. And so it's up to us to see how we integrate it. And I think that this deep study of the history, and that helps us in making this. I had to fight in Antwerp to dim the light down at night. They just didn't want it. They were so proud. It's like a lace, that upper part. They had never seen that like that. I was to say, we can't do this.
Yeah, very significant. You know, the importance that you're stressing here, for example, firstly on the process of mock-ups, you know, that's something that the younger people who are listening in today, you know, you cannot underestimate the importance of mock-ups. But the point that I'd really like to take up further, and Abha, get your inputs on this, is this sort of negotiation that happens with the various agencies. You know, when we're looking at a particular project at a single project level, and very often, like you have done, at a city level, at a municipality level, where our intention is to get communities involved, and you're actually dealing with these agencies and the communities. Abha, can you shed some light on, you know, how you have negotiated this in your projects?
See, I think when the negotiation is always part of any client-architect relationship. I think, I mean, I've never worked on residential interiors, and maybe that's the reason, because you have to negotiate with, you know, 5 different members of the family, and somebody wants pink and the other one wants this and that. But when it comes to a city, sometimes you've got to dig in your heels a little harder, because at that time, I always see that exactly as Susanna said, that this might be the person in charge right now politically, or you know, at the corporation level, or is the mayor of a city and has a certain vision. But here it cannot be one person's vision, which might actually clash with the identity of the city, or with the quality. So for example, if you're looking at you know, what is the public realm of a city? If as a visitor or as a pedestrian, you're walking across the city, you're not able to look into the houses. So that what they do inside the houses is their business. But what the exterior facades, the streetscapes, are really public realm. And it bothers me as an individual if my neighbor has something really ghastly, because I'm seeing it every day. Or if I'm a visitor walking through the city and it is done badly, and that, you know, all sorts of different themes, like a circus, it affects my perception of the city. So I've had to, at many points, have these intense negotiations with my clients sometimes, and with the users sometimes, and with the various building owners, where that might be private, or you know, that let's first see what the building is. For example, we're working currently on, Sarvdeep and I are working together again on illuminating heritage buildings in Mumbai. And it's so important to see that if you have a building like the Bombay High Court, there's a certain sobriety about it. There's a certain gravitas, and you can't create a visual circus of color, because that is not what the building stands for. So you need to understand what the building stands for and the use of the building. And very often, for example, even within the same streetscape, you might have a Bombay University, which is a very buff mallard stone, which is a beige stone. And right next to it is a dark Kurla basalt. And how do you approach the lighting of 2 very different colors on the 2 buildings, which are neighboring buildings, but yet, you know, draw it in together? I think that is a challenge, you know, even with color temperatures and lighting, and how do you look at, you know, what in that building do you want to highlight? So, you know, we had intense discussions about that, Sarvdeep and I, and then we said that we, like, for a streetscape, there were so many trees, and we said, these are Victorian Gothic buildings, and what is the highlighting feature of Victorian Gothic? And Susanna would, I'm assuming, have a very strong point of view. You're dealing with Gothic cathedrals too. But in the 19th century Gothic, it's just the verticality and the spires and all the vertical elements. So what we really took on as the hero of the lighting scheme was the skyline of these, you know, amazing turrets and roofs and finials, and that's what we heroed through our lighting design. So I think that is, you're negotiating constantly between people, between ideas, between, you know, color temperatures, between what the buildings stand for.
It's a constant dialogue, right? It will probably start with the narrative of the historical stories behind it. but it continues into more texture about the material, about the place, about, like you mentioned, even the vegetation around it. Sarvdeep, in your role, especially to address this elephant in the room about colored light and the response that the building itself sort of gives you to colored light, but as well as this issue of, a mock-up at site and how you treat different materials in different ways. Could you take us through, your experiences in this?
Linus, to add to what Abha said about Jaipur, when we were doing Jaipur, now there were so many types of buildings and 350 odd clients. And then we had, because there were streets and we had these signages to take care of. And worst of all, we had the street lighting, which had been done, which was not in our control and which had been freshly done. And the color of the street light did not suit us at all. Starting from there, and to create a rhythm in lighting over these kilometers and kilometers of bazaars and markets, there's a lot of negotiation which one does, and choosing the right color for each building was a challenge. We did a lot of tuning of light from 2200 degree Kelvin to 3000 degree Kelvin as per the building, so that we get a rhythm all through. And probably the client was not even aware that we were doing all that. And there was a lot of effort which goes into that. But if you are talking of RGB, use of RGB, unfortunately, I disagree with that concept of using colored light in heritage buildings. We very seldom done that. But even at Golden Temple, we did a small area with blue color. I sent you a picture of that, which was to actually, we wanted that particular area to stand out. So that had a particular color. So we've done that a little bit, but the Golden Temple also has an RGB mode for special occasions, for Diwali and other festivals which are celebrated there. So they use RGB in the same system. All the lights there are RGB, but 340 odd days they are single color. And only for Diwali and certain occasions they are colorful, and so that's a good use of technology. We wanted to avoid putting the fairy lights there because they were damaging the structure. So in fact, the Golden Temple project, we started with the idea of conserving the structure, because every time they would put these lights for Diwali and other functions, they would damage the building. Right. So the idea was to, have something permanent which stays there for a long time and still serves the purpose.
Yeah, interesting. So the jury is sort of still out there about the impact of colored light, right? And of course, if there is a very definite value to color being introduced, so let's say in terms of impact and part of your storytelling process, yes, by all means, we should consider it very carefully before going ahead. And Manav, you have done this quite tastefully in a lot of projects, right? Applied thought to the storytelling, as well as the use of controls, the understanding of how to make an impact, if at all, using color, but also working, in these two frames, of time reference, one as a permanent installation, one as a sort of a sound and light show, which might be more temporary in nature. Could you tell us, how you have approached when to use colored light, how to control it, what have been your processes in this?
Sure. Well, I agree with Sarvdeep and also Abha, where I think we need to be really, really conscious of where and when we use color. specifically, if I'm talking about my architectural lighting design projects for heritage monuments, I think it's very seldom that I've used color, or I've restricted myself to the range of various shades of whites, or maybe touching amber. In fact, for example, we worked on these very tiny, what I call unknown monuments of Delhi. We worked on about 15 of them collectively a few years back. There was this, some of these monuments had this touch of amber as an interior light, which fills in the space. So it was very consciously, and when I say amber, it was almost a flame red, flame amber, the fire flame amber. It was a very conscious way of pulling people in, pulling people inside. These are monuments which you just pass by, you just notice them. Probably you don't even know, half of them don't even have their names. But the idea was to pull that little extra minute of attention from these people, pull them in. And once you're inside, that entire space is just bathed with this amber light, almost monochromatic, kind of dissolving all details, not expressing any architectural detail from inside. It created that sense of eeriness and kind of a sad romanticism. I mean, these were these tombs belonging to the Lodi era. So that's, I mean, again, there was a bit of storytelling and what people feel in there and what is it that you want to express. So I think generally, typically, I would be very selective and very conscious of the colors I use for my permanent architectural installations. I don't think I would like to really distort the perception of the monument. But I think for shows, there, I think I do end up taking a lot of liberty. On one hand, because it's temporary. And on the other hand, I think it's something which is very integral to the script and the kind of the entertainment content that one is creating. But I think at the same time, I think it's very important for me as an architect first and then a lighting designer that people go back with the original impression of the monument. And it's not all the gimmicks and all the tamasha that we do that, that shouldn't be lingering on. So that's something I'm pretty conscious and careful about.
Yeah.
But I think, just sorry, Linus, just one more thing I want to add. But even coming back to architectural lighting, I think there is a certain, see, you use light to, in my mind, you use light to reveal. But very consciously, I've also ended up using color to actually dissolve details, especially the use of monochromatic light. So it's not always about revealing certain details, but it's also about what you want to hide, what you want to dissolve, and what you don't want to express. So again, how the light falls, where you place it, the color of the light, how do you play with the shadow, everything comes into play in that case.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, a lot of stories are told by shadow as much as light. So
and lack of shadow.
Yes, light and lack of shadow. It's about doing that mock-up to make sure you are achieving what you want. It's not that color should not be used per se as a blanket role, right? It's not about, I think the more important thing is when technology is used to aid the story, rather than technology itself being used to display, this is how good we are and this is what we can do with light. So understanding how the materials react, understanding how that response is, both at an emotional level as well as at a geographical level. I think that's the important thing that I'm sort of hearing both from you as well as Sarvdeep earlier. And Ashish, to go back to you, there are a lot of projects today, especially in India, but in some parts of the world, where this client body at the municipality level sort of goes out and reaches out to manufacturers, in a direct role to do a sort of design and build. In those situations, how is it that you all go about, taking care of these sort of historical, I would say, maintaining the sanctity of the history in those designs, right? How is it that you see this process happening within your organization and at a project level?
Yeah, so sure. I think so. The design approach, well, may or may not be as detailed as the eminent panelists here, But I think the simple process is, of course, we analyze the context. Like, of course, we need to do our homework in terms of knowing the history, understanding materials, the size, and basically looking at the vantage point. For example, looking at the viewing angles. Of course, that's a very pragmatic approach. Looking at the immediate surroundings. Now, how, like what Mr. Basur was talking about, the street lights were a menace, for example, in the Jaipur situation. So maybe there is already a neighbor which is sparkling bright, and you cannot really fight that, for example. So you need to really understand the the historical context, and also the present context, how is it existing in the present surroundings, for that matter. And then, of course, goes to the understanding the nuances in terms of if there's a jarok, how, what kind of architectural elements that we need to pick and choose, basically. So how do you compose eventually? So, and then like, I'll go back to the pragmatic part, which is looking like the mounting options, and how do I really mount it on the fixture for the the issues that White's talked about earlier. So I think it's all about implementing and the longevity of the project. So I think these are all simple steps. Of course, I can't go talk about it in a poetic sense, but I think mostly the process is to make sure. And then, of course, while all of that is the design aspect of things, then of course the dialogue with the customer or the client, so to speak, in terms of any expectations or any vision that they carry. Well, we've not had the mammoth task like Abha or Basur have talked about, in terms of talking to 300 plus people. But then, yes, there is obviously a Spock from the client side who does define, in a sense, of course, the expectation in terms of sometimes, of course, the dubious discussion of color also happens. You see, sometimes we've been also resisting at times, but then we do, of course, like I think Manav talked about, and also Basur talked about, there is the opportunity to use color, of course, but then this, of course, depends on the client, how much of it goes through, in the sense, well, like, I mean, let's take it like this, life is colorful, you can't really go dull and mundane, because light and color are inseparable very clearly. You cannot talk light without color. But the color temperatures is, so white is one, and then the rest of the colors indeed. But point remains is how much to use, of course. I think that's the balancing act is where the challenge is, you see, how much is too much, or like I think Abha mentioned, who's the hero, right? Is it the building or the light? I think, of course, the light is the secondary, is the creator of mood, actually, which is happening to the light. The building is still the hero. So I think it's all about the fact that who are we lighting it for? I think that's who's my client actually. Is it the visitors? Is it the local people? Is it the department, or whatever, whoever is paying for it, for that matter? I think all of that plays an immense role in the journey of arriving at some eventual installation, so to speak. So it's a pretty fuzzier journey. It's not really as easy as it sounds as a manufacturer, as a supplier, because we are getting paid for the material and not for the design, unfortunately. So you can't really put your foot down saying this is what we say, may or may not go sail through as designers would have it. So that's
on that note, I would like to in the interest of time, just again take a quick poll question on understanding the role of colored light in buildings, and ask people what they think about it. When should colored light be used to light heritage buildings? Would you use it to just demonstrate technology? Would you use it on days only of national importance? Would you use it only on festivals? Or would you use it only when appropriate to that cultural or historical context? Right? So in the light of the discussions that you've been hearing, I'd like the attendees to give feedback on this. And of course, as a lighting designer myself, I'm very happy to see these results, and I can see the smiles on the faces of the other ones too. So it is, I think, very clear that it should not be used just to demonstrate technology, right? That's not what you're in the game for. It is about telling a story and telling it well, right? Now, before I draw some closing comments and go into a question and answer session, I would like Susanna to also, just look at this role that we play of in the IALD, and as we go forward, LiDAI, the Lighting Designers Association of India, is also going live very soon. And what we see today is the role of professionals to actually, resolve these issues, these very important issues on how to deal professionally with the way heritage should be treated, right? So here are some more examples of work that is being done by the lighting design community in India, and they are winning awards globally. There is a lot of work that is being put in, a lot of thought that is being given to the way heritage is lit. And I'd just like you, Susanna, to sort of give us some closing comments on the role that designers, professionals who can, understand the importance of these things, get into collaborations with architects, with the lead designers, and sort of reach conclusions on how this is best handled.
There is an issue. We have this young profession, and it remains young. Our cities are, some of them are thousands of years old. So there is a basic lack of culture of electrical lighting. And some of our colleagues mentioned, I don't know anymore if it was Sarvdeep or Manav, street lighting. It is amazing that our public administration keep these two issues, architectural lighting and street lighting, separate. Our eye perceive the environment. So if it's not clear that every intervention has to be coherent, I keep on saying that, we won't go any further. We as lighting designer have an issue that we talk too much to each other. We need to talk to architects, because architects are unfortunately a big problem for us, because they don't accept, and now I know someone is going to be very unhappy, that they don't understand enough about lighting technology and about the effect on the space. They're very much bounded to the aesthetics of that. A nice luminaire, an interesting, let's use LEDs. What are we talking about? Right? So we need to make a much bigger effort on reinforcing the general culture of perception of space. We can't talk only about lighting, but what is happening with the space. When is the space comfortable? When there is visual comfort? When there is visual interest? In one of the slides you showed about my work, there was this facade of the Grote Markt of Antwerp, and as it was before, just blasted with sodium lighting, as long as it is lit. And when we arrived, we did a completely different work, cleaning up. But some cities are much further there. And so it's up to us to make people understand that it's not enough to put some lights. We can do many more damages than good things sometimes. It's not one body that can design street lighting and one body that design ambient lighting. Still needs to talk. Very often we get into a project, very excited, very happy. It's the beginning. Wow, they chose us, they trust us, we're going to transform this. And then, yes, there were plans for street lighting. We're really sorry. And the lighting levels sometimes are just, you can't deal with that. And that's your, like in music, dun, that's your la. I don't know how you say it. Yeah, that's your bass. And then you need to build on that. So this is definitely...
I might add to what Susanna is saying. Also, I think just lighting can, as a woman, I understand that lighting can sometimes make you feel safe in a city quarter and unsafe in a city quarter. And I see that sometimes when I'm driving past areas of Delhi, where even just the street lighting is so dull and there are pockets of just, you feel unsafe, which doesn't happen in many other cities because there's more light and there's more life at night, and not just limited to heritage.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, because very often when there are difficult areas and I go there, And the mayor tells me, we don't have enough light. I say, let's go and see. And most of the time, there is too much light. And light that is just, it's so glary that everyone sees you, but you just don't see. And so the old story of security, it's true. They say, we want more light. No, you want more good light. You need to see. So all this mechanism of perception is something we need to, in a way, to transmit to architects, to urban planners. I mean, we did really a lot. In the last 25 years, things have improved a lot, but we are impatient.
We have come a long way, you know, and I think it cannot be understated. The right amount of light in the right place sometimes is just enough. And I'm pretty certain we can go on discussing this for at least another couple of days, but unfortunately we do have a time limit. But Deepika, do you think we have time to answer a question using the panel? We will be sending detailed responses to all the answers.
Yes.
Is there time, do you think, to take one question?
I think we are short of time and losing out the audience.
In that case, I wish to extend a very heartfelt thanks to all the panelists for all their amazing insights, and look forward to taking this conversation forward in the future. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you all for your participation in today's webinar. We would also like to inform you that the extension of this webinar series will take place during the show on 19th of November. Make sure you register online at www.lidexpo-delhi.com to attend the live sessions. We request you to please fill in the survey at the end of the webinar and hope to see you at LED Expo. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.